What's happening, everyone? So I need to tell you about what went down on First Take this morning, because, honestly, I was not prepared for where this conversation went, and I'm still processing everything that was said. I had just finished watching the Seattle Seahawks absolutely demolish the New England Patriots in Super Bowl 60. Woke up the next morning still sick to my stomach about how the Rams came so close to being in that game. Made myself some coffee to shake off the disappointment, turned on ESPN to see what the hot takes would be about the Super Bowl, and there were Stephen A. Smith, Shannon Sharpe, and Mad Dog Russo getting ready to discuss the Los Angeles Rams and their heartbreaking loss in the NFC Championship game. But instead of just lamenting what could have been or breaking down that crucial play that cost them the game, they pivoted into this absolutely wild discussion about whether the Rams should be pursuing Courtland Sutton from the Denver Broncos to add another proven weapon to their offense and help them get over the hump next season. And man, the way this entire segment unfolded had me sitting there completely captivated because they were covering everything from the Rams' offensive firepower to their championship window to whether trading assets for a veteran receiver like Sutton makes sense when you're trying to get back to winning Super Bowls. Hey, what's up everyone? Before we dive into everything I have for you today, I need to share something real with you that would mean the absolute world to me. That subscribe button right there. Hitting it right now would bring me one step closer to my dream of reaching 1,000 subscribers. I know you're eager to get into all this content, but real quick, just smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell. It's such a simple thing. It takes literally 1 second, but it's honestly the biggest way you can support this journey and help me reach that milestone. Trust me, every single subscription gets me closer to that goal. And honestly, it would mean everything to me. So, do me that quick favor right now and be part of this dream becoming reality. The show opened in this really emotional way because instead of immediately jumping into the Courtland Sutton discussion, Stephen A. started by talking about how devastating it must be for Rams fans to watch Seattle win the Super Bowl knowing that the Rams were the better team. He had this sympathetic look on his face and he goes, "Now listen, I watched that Super Bowl last night and all I could think about was how the Los Angeles Rams should have been playing in that game instead of the Patriots." And you could tell by his tone that he genuinely felt for Rams fans. Stephen A. continued, "The Rams put up 457 yards on that Seahawks defense in Week 16. They put up 581 yards in the NFC Championship game, and both times they lost. So the question becomes, what do the Rams need to do this offseason to get over the hump and actually win the whole thing?" Shannon Sharpe immediately jumped in, and he started breaking down why the Rams fell short against Seattle and what they're missing on their roster. Shannon was talking about how the Rams have Matthew Stafford, who just won MVP, how they have one of the best offensive minds in Sean McVay, how they have Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp when healthy, but they don't have enough depth at receiver to sustain injuries and stay competitive throughout the season. Shannon made this really compelling point about how championship teams need multiple weapons at every position. And right now, the Rams are too thin at receiver. Mad Dog came in absolutely fired up, and he was yelling about how the Rams need to get back to their F them picks mentality that led them to win a Super Bowl a few years ago. He brought up how the Rams have 2 first-round picks this year, including the 29th overall pick, and they should be willing to trade those picks for proven veteran players who can help them win right now. Mad Dog was really emphasizing how the championship window with Matthew Stafford is closing and they can't afford to waste time developing young players when they could be adding proven talent. Stephen A. brought the conversation specifically to Courtland Sutton, and this is where things really got interesting. He started breaking down Sutton's situation in Denver and why he would be such a perfect fit for what the Rams need. Stephen A. was talking about how Sutton is 6'4" and a proven 1,000-yard receiver, how he's physical and can win contested catches, and how he would give the Rams another reliable option in the passing game alongside Puka and Kupp. Stephen A. was really emphasizing how the Rams need someone who can create mismatches and make plays downfield, and Sutton is exactly that type of player. Shannon jumped back in and started talking about the fit from a scheme perspective and why Courtland Sutton would thrive in Sean McVay's offense. He was breaking down how McVay loves versatile receivers who can do multiple things, who can block in the run game, who can run all the routes, and who can make plays after the catch. Shannon made this point about how Sutton has shown throughout his career that he can do all of those things. And putting him in McVay's system with a quarterback like Stafford would unlock an even higher level of production. Mad Dog interrupted, and he started talking about what it would actually cost to acquire Courtland Sutton from Denver. He was explaining how the Broncos just gave Sutton an extension, but they're in a weird spot with their rebuild, and they might be willing to move him if the right offer comes along. Mad Dog was making this point about how the Rams could offer their 29th overall pick, or maybe a second and third round pick combination, and that might be enough to get a deal done. Stephen A. came back and started talking about how adding Courtland Sutton would impact the Rams' offense and make them more dangerous. He was explaining how right now, defenses can focus on shutting down Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, but if you add Sutton as a third legitimate weapon, defenses would have no idea who to double team. Stephen A. was making this passionate argument about how that kind of offensive firepower is what you need to beat teams like Seattle, who have elite defenses. Shannon got back in there, and he started talking about the championship window and why the Rams need to act with urgency this offseason. He was breaking down how Matthew Stafford just won MVP at age 36, how he's still playing at an incredibly high level, but he's not getting any younger. Shannon made this point about how the Rams owe it to Stafford to give him every possible weapon to win another championship before he retires. And Courtland Sutton would be exactly that type of addition. Mad Dog jumped in and started talking about how Peter Schrager said on Good Morning Football that there should be a Rams parade happening right now instead of a Seahawks parade. He was explaining how the Rams were clearly the second best team in football for 2 consecutive years. And being the second best team doesn't mean anything unless you actually win it all. Mad Dog was making this point about how the Rams need to make a move that pushes them over the top, and trading for Sutton could be exactly that move. Stephen A. then shifted the conversation to talk about the depth chart and how Courtland Sutton would fit into the Rams' receiver room. He was explaining how you'd have Puka Nacua as your number 1, Courtland Sutton as your number 2, Cooper Kupp in the slot when healthy, and then whoever else they have as depth pieces. Stephen A. was arguing that kind of receiving cores would be one of the best in the entire NFL and would give Sean McVay endless options when designing plays. Shannon came back and he made an interesting point about the red zone and how Courtland Sutton would help the Rams score more touchdowns. He was talking about how Sutton's size and ball skills make him an elite red zone threat, how he can win jump balls and contested catches, and how that's something the Rams need more of. Shannon was explaining how having another big target in the red zone alongside guys like Puka and Kupp would make the Rams' offense almost impossible to stop when they get inside the 20. Mad Dog started getting animated again, and he was talking about what this move would signal to the rest of the NFC. He was yelling about how, if the Rams trade for Courtland Sutton, it shows they're not satisfied with being close. They want to actually win championships. Mad Dog was making this point about how the Seahawks just won the Super Bowl, and the Rams need to respond by making bold moves that show they're coming for that crown. Stephen A. brought up the financial aspect of potentially acquiring Courtland Sutton and how the Rams would manage his contract. He was talking about how Sutton just signed an extension with Denver, so his contract is locked in, and the Rams would be taking on that deal if they trade for him. Stephen A. was explaining how the Rams are already in a tough cap situation, but they have ways to create space if they're serious about winning. Shannon jumped back in and started talking about Sean McVay's track record with receivers and why he would love coaching a player like Courtland Sutton. He was explaining how McVay has made careers for receivers throughout his time as a head coach, how he turned Cooper Kupp into a Triple Crown winner and Super Bowl MVP, and how he could do similar things with Sutton. Shannon was arguing that the combination of McVay's scheme and Sutton's talent could be really special. Mad Dog came back, and he was talking about the alternative trade targets the Rams could pursue, like Trent McDuffie or Marlon Humphrey at cornerback, or even Max Crosby at defensive end. He was explaining how the Rams have options, and they need to decide whether they want to upgrade the offense or the defense. But either way, they need to make a significant move. Mad Dog was making this point about how trading for Sutton would be the offensive upgrade, while the other guys would be defensive upgrades. Stephen A. started talking about Matthew Stafford specifically and how he must feel after watching that Super Bowl. He He was explaining how Stafford knows he could have beaten that Seahawks team if the Rams had just made one more play in the NFC Championship, and how that must be eating at him. Stephen A. was arguing that the Rams owe it to Stafford to give him another legitimate shot at winning a championship. Shannon got back in there, and he started talking about Puka Nacua and how adding Courtland Sutton would specifically help the young receiver. He was explaining how Puka had an incredible season, but he's still young and developing, and having a veteran like Sutton who can take some of the pressure off would help his growth. Shannon was making this point about how championship teams have depth at every position, and the Rams need to build that depth at receiver. Mad Dog interrupted and started talking about the urgency of the Rams situation and why they can't afford to waste another year. He was yelling about how they've been so close for 2 consecutive years, how they have all the pieces in place except for a few more weapons, and how they need to strike while the iron is hot. Mad Dog was passionate about how the Rams can't just run it back with the same roster and expect different results.